If someone told us last December during a real onslaught of new Xiaomi models that the next Xiaomi-made phone we would be testing would arrive in May, we would probably think they're out of their mind. The company was in a real frenzy and we thought that they would never stop releasing one phone after the other. To be fair, we did not expect any new models before the Mobile World Congress, but then the pandemic started and the world stopped, well, at least this tech world did, for the most part. And now we have finally received the Redmi Note 9 Pro, a phone that should continue in the footsteps of its predecessors, Note 7 and Note 9, phones which we considered a great buy among the mid-priced category. Redmi Note 9 Pro may be a bit pricier upon release, but also offers more in terms of specs. It is still very fresh, so no retailers listed at the time of this review, but expected price is about $270, which is still quite affordable. We should say right away that this device is for those who prefer big phones. If your first association of a big phone is Galaxy Note 10 Plus, for instance, nah, that's too small. Think bigger. More like this year's S20 Ultra, actually just 1mm shorter and narrower and barely 13 grams lighter. Yes, it's big. So if you own a smaller phone and are thinking about an upgrade, you'll need new pants with larger pockets. This size has its advantages, but we'll get to that. Even though it's large, Redmi Note 9 Pro is not difficult to handle, quite the opposite. Since it is quite robust, you won't get that feeling that it might slip out of your hand, even if you've got small hands. The metal frame with a matte finish and a slightly flatter surface than usual also helps with providing a firm grip. Well, at least it feels like metal, although some early specs suggest it may be plastic, so who knows. It's not magnetic, so it may be aluminum or some very firm and convincing plastic. Speaking of ergonomics, we have to praise the position of keys, which are so well picked. Left side of the frame is almost completely clean, with only a triple slot for 2 nano SIM cards and 1 micro SD card, so you won't accidentally activate anything with the tips of your fingers when you grip the phone. On the right, there's a slightly receded power key, a very nice detail, which also doubles as a fairly fast and reliable fingerprint reader. That key is positioned so that the thumb will naturally lay on it when you hold the phone and unlock it exactly when you intend to use it, plus that small recession helps you feel where it is with ease. A bit above the power key there are 2 volume keys, close enough to reach but high enough not to get activated unless you want to. We love this and doubt that the positioning of both keys could have been any better. If you prefer a different positioning, please let us know in the comments. On the bottom of the frame there's a USB Type-C port, a decent sounding mono speaker and a microphone and a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the top there's another microphone and an IR blaster, which is always handy, allowing you to use the phone as a remote for various devices around the house. On the front, which you will probably look at most of the time, there are fairly thin bezels on all sides, while the rest of the front surface, a whole 84.5%, is covered by a very large screen. Above the screen, along the top edge, there's a speaker for voice calls, with a small and discreet but visible notification LED. Of course, there's an in-screen punch hole for the front camera, which by the way supports face recognition, and is positioned in the middle of the top of the screen. This symmetry is something we also find on the back, with a centrally aligned camera system, which we have to say is one of, perhaps not the best looking, but certainly most refreshing designs this year. The popular kitchen stove is there, but it is fairly small, lays a bit above the surface of the phone, with a flat extension below that houses the flash, and that, along with a small frame that groups 2 cameras, adds a bit of that personal flair that we feel is often missing on many models this year. Seems like those more affordable models are often a risk-free way for the companies to experiment and try some new designs, so they sometimes end up being better looking than those models we expect that from. The back of the phone we got to test is kind of a pearl white, which has visual depth, but without the now common color refraction effects, and we must say it looks quite elegant. Xiaomi calls this glacier white, while 2 other options are interstellar grey and tropical green, a sort of dark grey and teal green. Atypical for this price category, both the back and the screen are covered in Gorilla Glass 5 protective glass, which along with an aforementioned frame leaves an impression of a quality build. The screen is IPS type, but a very good one. It offers a faithful color reproduction, at least if you choose the standard display mode. We measured an impressive delta E deviation of only 1.5. Auto mode, which is default, uses an ambient light sensor for both brightness control and for color adjustments, which may not be faithful but certainly is practical. We mentioned that the screen is big, a whole 6.67 inches, which along with the resolution of 1080 by 2400 pixels, that's 20:9 ratio, provides a very good experience for pretty much any task you may do on a mobile phone, whether it's browsing the internet, gaming or using apps. Big screens are an advantage in this regard, and as long as you don't mind the size of the phone, the experience they provide is worth it. If anything is ruining the experience, that would be the Xiaomi's MIUI 11 user interface, which compared to some more finely designed solutions looks a bit cartoonish, at least the default theme. Luckily there's a theme store, so the looks can be changed, but still we've seen more functional UIs than this. You can notice that in small details, but that's the compromise that such a high value for money brings: better hardware or a more refined user interface. Xiaomi has proven it can make good hardware, so we hope they will improve on their UI as well. To be fair, under the hood, MIUI 11 offers plenty of settings that will let you adjust how the phone behaves and adjust the experience to your particular preference. The software base is Android 10, and on the hardware side, Redmi Note 9 Pro runs on 8nm octa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 720G with 6GB of RAM and 64 or 128GB of UFS 2.1 storage. The G in this chipset stands for Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite Gaming, a set of optimizations that, among other things, includes the use of AI to provide better performance and energy efficiency. We've tried a few more demanding games and found that it does in fact work, plus Call of Duty Mobile was running so smoothly that we had to check again if the phone had a screen that refreshes at more than 60Hz as well. It does not, but the performance was really awesome. This chipset is a bit of a surprise, and according to some tests, it is actually faster than Snapdragon 730G, which is as odd as the fact that 720G is in fact newer of the two. The battery life? 5,120 mAh. Huge. But check this, after 10 hours of watching YouTube with screen brightness set to 50%, the phone still had an amazing 62% of battery left, the best score we've measured so far on any phone. 3 days of use for most normal users easy. Plus the phone supports 30W quick charging. And now for the most interesting part, the cameras. Redmi Note 9 Pro has a camera system we see often these days with a 64MP main sensor, aperture of f1.9 and 26mm wide-angle lens. Beside that, there's an 8MP ultra-wide sensor that covers an angle of 119 degrees, as well as a 5MP macro and 2MP depth sensor. Thing is, even with similar cameras, each manufacturer uses the hardware in a different way, so the camera app as well as software processing and AI assistance can sometimes give significantly different results. In this case, the main sensor makes very good daily photos, both in full 64MP mode and the default 16MP mode, which groups 4 pixels together. There is a 2x zoom, but since there is no telephoto lens, it is achieved by cropping the main sensor, and the end result is not the best due to slightly more aggressive processing. Interestingly enough, if you take 64MP photos and crop them in software afterwards, you get better results. Even though it wasn't the case with some other phones, we do recommend just using 64MP mode all the time in daylight, as it offers a noticeably better contrast and a level of detail. Ultra-wide sensor is usable, especially with a super wide 119 degrees angle of view, but offers noticeably less detail than the main one, which is to be expected since it has 8 times less pixels. Also, for some reason with this sensor, metering has a tendency to overexpose photos a bit, losing some of the detail in the brightest parts of the scene. This is something that could be fixed with a firmware update or by manually adjusting the exposure, so keep that in mind when shooting ultra-wide on a bright day. As for the night photos, both sensors handle low light well even in normal mode, but the night mode is where the magic happens, and it is very good on this phone. It allows you to shoot handheld as long as you keep the hand steady, and after a few seconds it takes for the process to complete, the result is a very good photo, bright, detailed and with very vivid colors. This is probably one of the better night modes we've seen, and certainly the best one among the affordable phones. If there's anything to complain about, that would be that the camera sometimes has a problem finding focus at night, so it's best to shoot twice just in case or check the focus after the shot. When it gets the focus right, night photos on this model are in most cases really good. Speaking of really good, macro mode on this phone is probably the best one we've used so far on any phone, with an impressive magnification and good looking and detailed photos. As with any macro, the best results are obtained with plenty of light, although in this case the built-in flash is very usable too, thanks to its positioning relative to the sensor, and can get even better if you soften the light by using a piece of paper or cloth. For macro photography, Redmi Note 9 Pro beats even a couple of TCL phones which were superb, even though the focus on this was probably a bit faster. Those who love this type of photos will absolutely enjoy this model, and shooting macro with it is certainly very fun. The biggest disappointment regarding the cameras was the video, which you can record up to 4K with 30 FPS. Even though it looks good both in daylight and night, the stabilization is just bad, so the shakiness just ruins the video quality. This is another thing that could be improved with a simple software update, so we hope the Xiaomi will do something about it. If they do, the cameras on this phone would be a hit. The selfie camera is 16 megapixels, works decently, and just like the back one, supports portrait mode with background blurring, as well as creating short video clips for social media and 1080p video clips. All things considered, it will be impossible to look for a new phone in this price range and not consider this model. We're trying to remember another phone that offers as much features for the money, but none comes to mind. True, not everyone likes large phones, and the Redmi Note 9 Pro is large, but still offers such an amazing feature set at this price. Again, it should start at $270 for a 6 and 64GB model. We expect another phone to arrive soon, a cheaper Redmi Note 9S, which is practically the same phone but with 48 instead of 64 megapixels and 80-watt charging instead of 30, so we'll see how that one performs. Still, Redmi Note 9 Pro is an amazing value for money, no doubt about it.